everybody. So I want to talk to you today about the art of planning for your animals. And the reason I haven't referred to that as specifically pets is because I wanted to make sure that we were inclusive of all domestic animals, because that is how the code sections are written in the probate code in California. And so these specific things are include not just dogs and cats, but it includes tortoises, it includes donkeys, it includes horses. It's any kind of domesticated animal. So the trusts that we're going to talk about a lot today are specifically related to planning for your animal care, no matter what type of animal it is. It does not include in any form or fashion wild animal care. So there has to be other situations where we have wild animals that are being cared for. They're not covered by this legislation. And then I do want to apologize because I actually put the wrong date. Today is November the 12th. And I wanted to let everybody know that today's interactive. So if there's questions, we're just going to take questions along the way. And so with that, we're going to get started. So my name's Tracy Potts. I'm an attorney in Sacramento, California. I am certified by the State Bar of California Board of Legal Specialization. I've been practicing now for 35 years. And I am a fellow at the American College of Trust and Estate Council. And hopefully, if there's something that comes up, I understand that Erin is going to share this with everybody. So if there's something that comes up, you can direct your questions to her. And if she needs to get in touch with me, I'll be glad to answer those. All right, so what we're going to cover today is an overview of options in providing for animals. And in that, basically, there are lots of different options. And we're going to talk about, some that are specifically important, and things that you might not have thought about. And with that, we're going to get started with really and truly what we're going to do for animals during your lifetime. This is the part that most people miss. They only are providing for their animals at death, but sometimes you need to provide for your animals even if it's during your lifetime, because you might have incapacity or you might have periods of absence. And so there are lots of different ways to do that, and we're going to talk about each one of those. Basically, during your lifetime, there's pet trusts that can be created. They can be either irrevocable, meaning that they're going to be a trust that cannot be changed or revoked, or they can be revocable, where you basically are setting up a pet trust during your lifetime. That's effective right away, where you actually have made a transfer to that trust. And so basically, we're going to go through what the pet trust is, and I'm calling it a pet trust, even though it's a trust for the care of an animal, because most of us refer it as a pet trust for shortcut purposes. And it's just a vehicle that some people use. And most people think that the pet trust is only used when you pass away. And I wanted to point out to people that it can be used during lifetime. It is, and often will be a good tool for you potentially during lifetime. There's also the ability to use a revocable trust that you have. You can have specific provisions in that revocable trust to deal with your incapacity or absence. And then there's powers of attorney that we're going to talk about, the power of attorney for property management. And I'm going to tell you some pros and cons for using the different provisions. but you can have this power of attorney that can have a provision specifically providing for your agent to give care to your pet. So let's start with after your death. So we did the lifetime, and then after your death, we're going to talk about the vehicles that we have for that as well. After your death, we can have an irrevocable pet trust again that can have provisions in it for your pet at death. We also can have a revocable trust that's now irrevocable because you have passed away and it is turned into an irrevocable trust that can have provisions to provide for your animal. And we can have a will that specifically has some continued care for your animal. So, to start with, let's talk about pet trusts. So, pet trusts are established in California under what we call Probate Code Section 15212. And they are basically trusts for the care of animals. It can be a trust that's set up for one animal. It can be a trust that's set up for multiple animals. It can have provisions in it that provide for different care provisions for different animals depending upon their needs. You can have really kind of any type of care that you want to be provided. But there are some specific rules about these trusts, and you have to make sure that you provide for them. So, the one specific rule is that the animal still has to be living. They have to be living upon your death. And even though you can make these lifetime trusts for the event of incapacity, that also allows you to do it. It won't stay in effect if you pass away. Your animal passes away before you, but it will stay in effect till the last animal that you're providing for is in this trust. None of the money in a pet trust can be used to benefit a trustee. So if you're setting up a pet trust, you can't have the pet trust paying all of the funds into it as a salary to the trustee. It is not intended for you to try to circumvent the death exemption rules. It's also not intended for you to set this up to benefit a specific person and try to get away from the gift rules. This really is intended that you are setting up a non-charitable provision specifically to provide for the animal and not a person. It has to have a specific distribution provision in it on what happens when the pet passes away, the animal passes away. If you don't do that, then what's going to happen is it's going to pass to your heirs at law at the death of the animal. So it's really important that if you have what you want to have happen with the funds that are remaining, that you include that provision in the draft of the pet trust. Um, you have to have a person designated to enforce the intended use of this trust. So the animals can't speak for themselves. Hopefully one day that'll change and we'll be able to understand them. Maybe we'll get some kind of translation, artificial intelligence that can tell us what the animals say. Although sometimes we might not want to know. But since they can't enforce the trust themselves, we have to have a person that has to have that role in making sure that the trustee is going to actually use the money for the benefit of the animal. And if someone is not designated, the court will actually take a position that they will appoint someone if you don't do it yourself and make sure that there is always a designated person set up to protect the animal and make sure that they're being cared for based upon the terms of the trust. The one thing that some people do not like about this provision is that a pet trust also has a provision in it by statute. Um, the person that you designated as your enforcement person is basically able to require inspection of the animal at any point in time, which most people do like that provision. But any nonprofit charitable corporation that cares for animals as its principal activity can also require an inspection of the animal if they are aware that a pet trust exists for an animal. You don't have to have a relationship with this nonprofit charitable corporation. It can be any kind of charitable corporation. I always recommend when someone sets up a pet trust that they actually specifically designate what non-charitable corporation that they would want to do any inspection of the animal, so that you don't have random corporations claiming that they have the right to do inspections related to any pet trust. But just know that that provision is in there. I don't think it's a provision that would prevent you from specifically doing a pet trust, but I know that sometimes it does cause some fear as to what these entities and what entities could be stepping in and trying to enforce the document. And they do have standing on a pet trust to make sure if they don't believe the animal is receiving the care that you provided for in the trust, they can file suit against the trustee and are able to take care of that. So I like people to understand those statutory provisions in addition to the provisions that you're going to draft and put in that pet trust. And you can have lots of provisions in the pet trust. You can have that residence will be maintained for the animal, and that the trustee can use the funds in the trust to pay all of the expenses of the residence. I have had situations where we have done that. Sometimes we've provided for a caregiver to be on the premises with the animals in the home. Other times we've had where someone is paid to go and feed the animals on a regular basis. Um, we've had, different situations. And I would say that just so you know, to prevent some of the abuses and have the person designated to enforce that, we generally have them check on the animals. We usually have the animals have a microchip, one that's great for making sure that they can be found if they ever were disappearing, but it also makes it clear that the pet never gets replaced by a new pet. So it is to make sure that the animal that we're intending to care for is the animal that we're caring for, and that no one is trying to dupe someone into extending the pet trust if the animal's not living. And so there are protections that trustees often put into place, or the enforcement person often puts into place to make sure that that's taken care of. Then we also have revocable trusts. So revocable trusts are basically an estate planning tool that a lot of people put into place to make sure that it's a will substitute in effect. And it provides for you during your lifetime, and it also provides for what happens to your assets at the time of your death. A revocable trust can be quite a good tool also for caring for pets. Um, and that requires that basically we put a provision in there. So often a revocable trust has a provision in there that says how you're cared for during your lifetime. And there can be a clause in there that also requires that the trustee maintain your animal with a certain level of care. Trustees will often do that anyway, but if we want to make sure that the animal is protected, we'll put a provision in there that says what our care standard is for the pet and that continuing care should continue. Um, Sometimes people feel like if they have to go into an assisted living facility or a skilled nursing facility and the pet can't follow, we sometimes put provisions in there on rehousing of the pet and what the standards are for rehousing. Sometimes it's a designated person that we want it to be rehoused with. Um, and specifically how we want that person to have provisions to provide for the pet. Maybe we want to make sure that there's like a certain dollar amount that's set aside for that person to use for vet bills, for any other kind of bills that might come up. We also often want to do where we have, you know, a certain type of food that we want to provide. We have, certain level of number of vet visits a year. We can put lots of provisions in there, but lots of times people forget to put the end life provisions in place. So I just want to make sure that you do that as well. Then we also have at death, lots of people do different things. Sometimes they create a subtrust that becomes a pet trust at death, and it becomes a legal separate trust. We fund that pet trust with the specific dollar amount or percentage of the estate, and that provides for the care of your animal for the remainder of their life. Some people don't want to set up a separate pet trust and have an ongoing trust that's going to exist all of those times. And in those circumstances, we want to potentially have a designated person that's going to specifically inherit your pet or your animal. And that person potentially would be given a stipend that they specifically can use to care for the pet. Those types of circumstances, you really have to have somebody that you really trust and will do the best for the pet. But some people prefer that instead of have this ongoing trust. There's also that power of attorney that we talked about. And basically, a power of attorney is a document that gives an agent the authority to act on your behalf. And you can make a provision specifically that authorize that agent to put continued care for your pet. It can be one of their duties and obligations is to be able to use resources to care for your pet, and you can put specific authorizations in this document. Um, you could also put a provision in here that if you were to, again, go into a situation where your pet can no longer have you as their primary caregiver, then in those circumstances, we want to make a provision that specifically is um, that, they can be rehoused again, and we can provide for their continuing care either through your assets or through potentially providing an allowance or a stipend to someone who's going to care for that pet. But the problem with powers of attorney is that they expire at your death. So if you're only using a power of attorney to deal with the care of your pet, then the problem with that is that, we don't have any provisions to care for your pet at death. Now, you can use a power of attorney to potentially do your lifetime planning for your pet and making sure that they um, are the ones that can be the ones that do that. But if you're going to only use a power of attorney, we want to at least have a provision as well that provides for a will if you do not have a revocable trust. Um, and it's really important in figuring this out is because you really don't know the status of the health of your animal. And so you want to make sure that no matter what their care needs are during your lifetime or at your death, that we're really specifically making sure that we've provided for whatever those needs are. And actually, this is one of my favorite pictures of all the ones I picked. um, and a will is really something that is similar to provisions in your trust, and it can provide an inheritance of the animal itself, or it can provide, again, that you've selected a person to inherit your animal. I know most of us feel that animals in our lives are members of our family, but for still under the purposes of the law, animals are still considered property. And so therefore they can be inherited, whether it's in provision where we're providing for them in a pet trust, if it's a provision that we're providing for their inheritance in a revocable trust, it's a provision where we're having someone who has our power of attorney and they're eligible to manage our property. Uh, that's why a power of attorney for property management applies to an animal, is because they still have that status under the law that they are in fact considered what we call chattel, which is a personal property term. And so basically, as such, we can provide for their transfers, their rehousing, all of the things that they need over time. And uh, you can do a sub trust within your will, just like you could do a sub trust within your revocable trust. Um, Wills are basically testamentary documents. So providing for your pet in a will means that they're only effective at death. So it will not provide for you what you need to provide for your animals during lifetime. So if you're just going to do a will, you'll need to do the power of attorney for property management at the same time. And all of these things can be combined together. All of these things can be separate. You could have a pet trust and still have a power of attorney and a will that you had the power of attorney provide for the um, pet during lifetime. You could have the will that then has a transfer that goes back and transfers the money then to a pet trust that may have already been created and not been funded, or it could be a pet trust that gets created in your will specifically. But we can have as many terms as we want in a pet trust. So those can be expanded upon. And so really and truly, all we care about in doing our estate plans is that we want to provide for our family, and animals are definitely a member of our family. And so I'm going to talk about one other area that we want to make sure we're providing for. And I think I didn't include it as a document here because it's not a document that's specifically related to pets, but that is advanced healthcare directives. Now, you can't do an advanced healthcare directive for your pet because of their status as property, but you are the primary caregiver of your pet. And so, as that primary caregiver, you need to make sure that you're taken care of. And so, it's really important. The documents of all the estate planning documents that you can do, an advanced healthcare directive is probably the number one document that you need to do to provide for yourself. And if you're providing for yourself and you're making sure that your health issues are taken care of, you're going to be around longer to take care of your animal. And so that's really the number one document that you always want to do. And really and truly, your um, advanced healthcare directive is a document that's going to be able to be used to tell your agent, the person that you're selecting, as to what you want to have happen with regard to the care of your pet is, you know, you be taken care of, giving your agent the ability to take care of you. And then your power of attorney for property management will give your agent the ability to take care of your pet. So we're going to combine all of these things together, and you're going to take care of you first. It's like the example of the airplane. They always tell you to put your own mask on and then you put the mask on everybody else, because if you pass out, then you're not going to get the mask on anybody else either. So, same thing with your pet. You got to take care of you to make sure that you are available to take care of your pet. And you want to make sure that you have provisions in your overall estate plan, whether that's through a will and a power of attorney, or that's through a revocable trust that sets forth exactly how you want. You don't want people trying to figure out what you intended for your pet. Um, if you're not going to put provisions in there, you need to have the conversation with the person that you expect is going to adopt your pet if you're not around anymore, or the person that you're expecting that if you have a stint where you have to go to rehab or you have to go to a hospital for an extended period of time, you want that person to understand the level of care that your pet should receive. Now, at our house, our pet always got the highest level of care in the house, and everybody else was underneath. As my pet would probably tell you is the right way. And so basically, if you have a certain standard that you want your pet to receive, for example, you want them to have a specific type of food, you want them to have a specific number of days that they have play dates, you want them to have, a specific number of times that they go to a vet, the specific vet that you want them to go to. You want, maybe you have a cat that you specifically want to go to only a cat vet because they're so afraid of dogs, that that's a stressor on them. Maybe your cat or your dog is allergic to a certain specific type of food. And if you don't put that provision in there, how is someone else to know that after you're gone? Or when you're incapacitated and you can't tell them that you have that allergy. So it's really important to have those specific wishes spelled out and tell someone about that. And also to make sure that your planning is appropriate for your specific animal. Tortoises are often ones that are really difficult for us, as are certain levels of birds. Some of those animals can live over 100 years. And so we have to have a document that's going to provide for their care for an extended period of time. Donkeys are also another type of animal that we have to have extended documents for, because donkeys often have a life expectancy of 40 years. So these animals that have these long expectancies, one, you need to know that when you adopt the animal, that they're going to be around, and sometimes they're going to be around long after you're not around. And you need to make sure that their care is not going to lapse just because you can't be their primary caregiver. So you need to make sure whatever planning you put in place is appropriate for that specific animal, and make sure that they're going to be uh, taken care of. And actually, I will tell you, as an estate planning attorney, donkeys are the ones that I often have the most issues with. Lots of people adopt donkeys because they're adorable animals. Um, but donkeys live for often, people often adopt them later in life. And so donkeys often outlive their owners. And people forget to provide for donkeys in their estate plan. And so it is always a scramble. It is always an extended period of time because, it's hard to find donkeys a place to be adopted. It is a, um, And you often don't, this goes for dogs and cats too. You often don't want them to have to go into adoption services. And you want them to have that ability to be adopted. I will tell you that so far, um, every donkey and dog and cat has been rehoused successfully in all of the estate planning work that I've done over the years and the administration work. But you know, it kind of feels like sometimes you have to find the lawyer that actually, or the trustee that really cares for the animals and make sure that that happens. Because there's also lots of horror stories about things that don't happen right. And so we want to make sure that we're really making clear that we have all of the care in place and everything that needs to be taken care of. And how about you, Erin or Olivia or Mary? Any questions that you guys want to ask?
I'd say nothing for me. This is very thorough and I things that I didn't even know about. So just kind of thinking about the all the different ways that you can do this. Nothing stands out for me. Anything for you, Olivia?
Really great. And I really appreciate the nod toward the making sure that your own healthcare directive is set up so that you can then take care of your pet and thought about that. And now I'm thinking about setting something up for my own pets. Thank you, Tracy.
You're very welcome. And I always tell people that, you can never provide for other people unless you've provided for yourself. And we're all women on this call at this moment. Women are historically the people that don't do self-care. And we also, though, are the primary caregivers. So if we don't practice any self-care, we're horrible caregivers because we can't always fulfill what we want to do as a caregiver. So it's really important that people think about that caregiving of themselves, which includes an advanced healthcare directive, before they're thinking about what they need to do with regard to uh, all of the other pieces that need to be in place. And the most vulnerable of all of our family is our pets, and they're completely dependent upon their owners for their care, for their custody, for everything that they need in life. And so it is primary that you have to make sure that you're going to be around as long as possible to take care of them and make sure that they get all the proper care that they want. You don't want to just spoil them while you're capable of spoiling them. You want them to have a happy life for the remainder of their life. So,
Yeah,
anything else?
this makes me realize my mom, been going over some of her estate planning, and her brother is planning to, they've made the verbal agreement that her brother is going to take her dog, but I don't know that it's built into her estate plans at all. And I'm thinking that I will be sharing this recording with her to really give her some helpful information.
Yeah, and lots of people will think that just making those verbal commitments is sufficient, and in some circumstances it works out just fine, but there's sometimes that it doesn't, and so we want to make sure that we put something in there to deal with the situations where there's a potential that her brother passes away before she does, and then there's no provision for the pet. So we want to also not only provide for care and trustees, we want successor trustees. We want a designated person that's taking care of them and who might receive them. We want a backup plan in the event that that person is not available. And we just want to make sure that no matter what, the the pet or the animal, other domesticated animal, is always going to receive that continual care. I will tell you though, I had a situation, and my problem cases are always donkeys. Um, I had a situation where the person had become incapacitated, and so the donkey had not gotten correct care for some period of time, and so we actually had to petition the court to get authority because there was no provisions for the donkey to provide the extensive vet bills that we needed to do to get the donkey back into stable condition. And so it's unfortunate because the donkey had to wait on us to get a court order, and we had the potential that other people would reject that we were spending too much money on the donkey. But so that's important for us. That's what we want to make sure. And so with that, I guess I'm going to wrap up unless you guys have anything else.
I think Mary had a question. If the pet is a prized animal who may be used for breeding or may want to make public appearances and the owner wants both to continue, would that special language be required?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You want to make sure that, especially show animals. Some people, some people think that that's a good thing, and some people think that's not a good thing. You want to be specific that that's what your expectations are, is that's a show animal, and that those shows would continue. And there's lots of different types of show animals. There's dogs, there's cats, there's horses. There's lots of different kinds of show animals that, most horses, if you didn't let them go to the show that they were supposed to go to. And sometimes some dogs, um, they would feel like you were mistreating them.
I have a question kind of coming back to my mom. So like with her dog, she was had a rough start. So she can be food aggressive and has bit my mom on occasion, working with training and all that kind of stuff. So I guess, is there any illegality? So if she were to leave the dog to my uncle, but the dog bit, are there any like, my mom wouldn't want anything to happen to her, but I know sometimes dogs who bite, there's a legal requirement to let them go. Is there something that you would need to put or would have to be included in a will around that?
You can't put anything to prevent a enforcement proceeding around your pet if they have violated pet statutes for violence, basically, aggressiveness or, biting. Um, Usually, if it's within a family, it's not an issue, but if your dog has mauled a neighbor or, caused extensive damage. And I actually had this in my own family. Um, I had a very beautiful cat, um, that was uh, quite the pretty animal, and everyone was interested in him. When he was outside, he was quite beautiful, and so everybody wanted to look at him. Well, he happened to be laying outside one day, and he was laying under my car, and someone decided that they would like to have the cat.
Hmm.
Well, my cat wasn't particularly excited about changing owners. And when the person grabbed his foot, he mauled their arm.
Hmm.
And so and then the person went to the emergency room and said that there was this cat that had mauled him. Well, the police showed up at my door and said, your cat um, mauled this person, and then they explained though that the emergency room personnel had told him, well, how stupid are you that you would grab the paw of a cat and try to pull them out from under a car?
Especially a cat that's not yours.
Yes. But my cat was fortunately he had had his rabies vaccinations, so he was quarantined, and to make sure that and it could have resulted in him being terminated. But there's nothing I could have done in that situation to prevent that from occurring in an estate plan. Now, when I was living, I pulled every stop I had, and my cat was quarantined in my home, and not in a cage at a facility. But that is a situation that I did make a lot more effort to make sure that my cat only spent time outside in an enclosed facility and no longer where he could just be roaming. And you just have to make sure that the family member that adopts that animal um, knows to keep the animal away from strangers so that you don't get in a situation where that you have that interaction with somebody outside of the family that would file a complaint and potentially have the animal terminated for their behavior.
That's helpful to know. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that I had a personal experience, but
It's unfortunate, but helpful. Helpful to be able to. Mary did have one last question about planning for charitable gifts to organizations like RedRover. So I'll say that Tracy, you are available to assist anybody as an attorney to help them set up their will or their estate planning.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
And charitable giving is a large part of that. And there is lots of opportunities to give charitable giving. And um, IRAs are a great place to do charitable giving. Lots of people don't realize that that's a great way to provide for your favorite charity, which is allows the charity to receive the monies tax-free and also allows your family members to receive other assets that potentially aren't taxable.
okay, so I guess if anyone is interested, they can reach out to me and I can connect them with you.
Absolutely.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for your time, Tracy. This is a wonderful presentation, very informative. I think our members are going to find this super helpful, and I'd love to post this, share this with everybody, and post it on our website to really kind of spread the word about how we can plan for our pets in the future.
Great. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for your time and thank you for the great questions. And if there's anything else that comes up in the future, just let me know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.